Good evening, Central Valley. Once again, this is Valley Movers and Shakers, and I am your host, Kevin Little. For those of you who have tuned in before, thank you for tuning in again. For those of you who are tuning in for the first time, let me give you a short rundown of what our show is about. We try to focus on people and things that are trying to make a positive difference here in the Central Valley, to improve the quality of our life, to make this an even greater community than it already is, to increase our economy, to increase our diversity, to excel in school, whatever the case may be. The theme of this show is that we get enough bad news, and here, at least for an hour every Thursday evening, you get good news. You get news about people who are trying to move ahead and move this community ahead. So today, we're going to take a little different approach. Today, we're talking about the recent election, and I think that everyone who's running for office qualifies as a mover and shaker, trying to make a positive difference in the community. And so we're going to talk about the elections, run it down, see if there's any trends, see if there were any surprises, if there were any disappointments, and not in a partisan way, but just in an analytical way to see what's happening in our community. And so it'll be fun, and we're going to have Gail Gaston, a local political consultant, with us today talking about this, educating us as to what went on the last couple of days, if maybe you were as busy as I've been. And it'll be very interesting. So we'll be right back in a few minutes with the beginning of our election talk. Stay tuned. Welcome back to Valley Moves and Shakers, and we are talking about all things political today in light of the recent election and the primaries and the results. So I've got someone who knows about Valley politics as well as anyone here with me today, Gail Gaston, a local political consultant. Gail, thanks for joining me today.
Thank you, Kevin. Thank you for inviting me this evening.
So you have been doing political consulting in this community for quite some time, isn't that right?
I have. I've been actively involved in campaigns for the past 25 years.
And that's all been here in the Valley?
Been here in the Valley, yes.
And so obviously as a consultant, it's important, imperative for you for your own work to keep a tab on the political pulse, to see what trends are suggested by elections, and to really analyze these things, maybe more than people like me do.
Yes, we look at the numbers, we look at the districts that candidates are running for, and like to see a good candidate run in a district where there's a need, and educating the community on different services.
So what I thought we would do today, what I thought would be interesting and fun, and hopefully you'll join me,
okay,
is let's just go through the election results and talk about how things came out, and whether there were any surprises or disappointments from your perspective, and what we're looking at maybe in November, and just have some fun with it.
Okay.
You ready to get started?
I'm ready.
All right. So the governor's race. We had obviously a primary in the governor's race.
We did.
There were an array of candidates who were running. It was, I don't know, 30? A lot.
Several, yes,
yeah.
Several candidates.
And so we have the results, and I don't know if it was a surprise that Gavin Newsom got the most votes, but
I don't think that was a surprise. I think that was known. Different polling and things that were done, I think, and he has a lot of name recognition, already holding an office, being an elected official in San Francisco for several years. So I think he already had a voter base, a good voter base.
And that obviously counts for a lot when you're
Absolutely.
running for office, to already have that recognition.
Absolutely, with that name recognition.
So, and then in second position was John Cox, who I think maybe people don't know as much about, but he's the Republican, and he got 26% of the vote.
Yes.
So we're looking at Newsom versus Cox in November, right?
Yes, we'll be looking at Newsom versus Cox. And I think with John Cox, he did bring some name recognition with him because he addressed issues that he was supported by our President Donald Trump.
Right.
So that brought a lot of Donald Trump supporters that would continue to support John Cox. So I think that helped him get those votes and for him to be in second place.
And so we've got an election between, it sounds like, two fairly different candidates
Yes,
coming up.
totally different, totally looking at California with different points of view. And so I think that November one will be very interesting to see how that plays out.
It seems like the debates should be pretty interesting.
They should be, yeah, they should be. One of the disappointments in that one, and I believe a lot of people were looking at Antonio Villarosa, and his numbers were very low.
And it looks like he's got about 13.5%.
Yeah, and they were looking at him as pretty much even possibly beating Gavin.
Okay. And it just didn't turn out that way.
It just didn't turn out. I think that he was reaching to too many areas for votes.
Oh. Well, and that's the former two-time mayor of Los Angeles.
Yes.
Well,
he's a Democrat. I think he was trying to get a lot of Republican votes. He was still trying to get the Hispanic votes. So he wasn't really focused on one group of people to help bring his campaign along.
And so it's expected at this point that he would probably get behind and get his campaign behind Newsom's campaign and be supportive?
We would hope so, because he's a Democrat, and if he ever wants to run again, he would be wise to endorse and support Gavin Newsom.
Okay. So let's talk about the Senate race, and that was, I guess, one of the next ones, and Dianne Feinstein got a very large majority of the votes.
Yes.
Distant second was Kevin De Leon.
Yes.
And what can you tell us about that?
So I see Dianne as getting that 44% because she has a history here with California. She has a voter base, lots of women that support her. And I think there was a backlash when some of the De Leon supporters were saying she was old. And people didn't like that.
The older I get, there's nothing wrong with being
old.
They
thought she was too old. They don't think she would be able to pull off her term. But I think that gave her more support.
Oh.
Because she's a senior, she knows the subject, she's in the Trump administration, and she's there for California and always has been.
So Dianne Feinstein, this would be term number 5?
I believe it is.
Okay.
Or term number 6.
Okay. So she's.
But I was disappointed that Kevin De Leon only got 11%.
So what do you think that says about where
I think
people are
that
at right
it
now?
says that lots of young Democrats that were campaigning for him possibly didn't go vote.
Young people don't tend to turn out as
Yeah.
much in the primary election,
Yeah,
particularly.
yeah.
Isn't that right?
True, very true.
Why do you think that is?
The possibility is because there's a large group of people voting, like lots of people, candidates that are running,
Right.
and they just really don't focus on the primary. They'll go to the general.
Okay. All right. So we've got, I guess, there are a lot of House districts, but the House districts that are more, I guess, local to us, obviously there was the House of Representatives race between Devin Nunes and Andrew Jans.
Andrew Jans, yeah.
And
yeah.
How did that turn out?
Well, in Fresno County, Devin Nunes had 58%, and in Tulare County, he had 61%, and that's his good voter base there. Andrew Jans, 32% in Fresno.
Okay.
And I believe it was 27 in Tulare.
And Andrew Jans is a Democrat.
Andrew Jans is a Democrat, and he's challenging Devin Nunes, which Devin has a good voter base, and
Right.
he has loyal voters.
But just because there's a disparity in the primary doesn't mean it's going to be necessarily the same way in the general election. Is that right? It's going to have to, people are going to have to figure out ways to motivate their voting
Yes.
base and get them to come out.
Jantz is the challenger, and Nunes is the incumbent. So Jantz will have to get out there strong and get the votes and get the people to the polls to vote.
Right. So that'll be coming up in November, obviously.
That will come up in November.
So let's look at some of the other races. I mean, there have been lots of interesting, races. We got lieutenant governor. And were there any surprises as far as that was concerned?
With Ilani running for lieutenant governor, she had 23%, and that was a well-done campaign.
And
a
that's
lot of money.
Ilani Kunalakis?
Yes, and
Yes.
she invested, a lot of money was invested in that campaign. And Dr. Hernandez, he's an incumbent in the assembly, so he does have a voter base, but I don't think he campaigned as hard as she did, because she was visibly everywhere.
And so Ilani Kunalakis edged Ed Hernandez 23.5% to about 21%.
Yeah, and I think probably at the end of the day, she'll probably be up to 25%.
And then again, it's going to be
Then
anybody's
it'll go to
race in
November.
huh?
It'll go to November.
So that'll be an interesting one to
It
watch.
will, and there'll be a lot of money spent on that campaign. And she's a frequent visitor to Fresno.
Okay.
She comes here quite often and is very visible.
All right.
And I think that visibility for candidates helps
Well, sure.
in the community, out there in the communities to get the votes. So it's being visible, that visibility being there.
So
It's
if
so
you have an
important.
elected office, obviously it's easy to be visible. You're on the news,
Yes,
you're in the
yes,
paper.
yes.
And then the only other way
You
to
have
get
the
visible,
edge.
if you're not in that position, is to spend a lot of money.
Yes,
And that's
and
what,
market yourself.
Right. And not just spend the money, because we've seen in some elections that, like what you were saying about governor, the spending of the money doesn't necessarily work. You also have to have the right strategy.
Yeah, they have to have the strategy.
All right. So let's look at Secretary of State. Alex Padilla, I don't think there was much of a surprise, got more than half of the vote.
Yeah, I think that was something that everyone kind of thought that would happen.
And running a distant second was Mark Muser.
Yes,
Right.
yes.
So that's pretty much wrapped up now.
Yeah, that is, yeah.
Okay. And then
And I don't think anybody ever really had any complaints about him. There wasn't a lot of campaigning like against him. It was just somebody wanting to run for that office.
Okay.
The challengers.
Right. But that's good. That's what
Yeah,
keeps
yeah.
our system healthy. You never like
Absolutely.
to see people running unopposed, right?
Yeah.
There's
Which that has happened.
well, and particularly in a lot of local races.
Yeah, a lot
right?
of local races, yeah.
So, and then for controller, we've got again
Betty Yee.
Betty Yee has wrapped that up.
Betty Yee,
with almost
and-
62%
Yeah,
of the vote.
well liked in the Fresno area often, travels often throughout the state of California, and really is very open to communicating with the voters.
So, what do you, in terms of voting? Let's talk a little bit about the turnout before we keep marching through these. Overall, less than or right
Well,
around 4 million people voted here in the state of California.
Here in the
primary.
state of California, locally 19%.
Right. So, what do you? That's a low
It's
turnout.
it's a low turnout. It's a low turnout.
Right. So how do you square that with people? A lot of people seem on both sides of the aisle. We're living in a very where it seems like there's a sharp division in our country in terms of political attitudes and such. But it doesn't necessarily translate, at least not for this primary, into people getting out and voting their feelings. At least not in the primary. Why do you think that is?
With the primary, you have to be more committed to a candidate. So it's your people that are committed to one local candidate or one, state candidate. So they're the ones that are working and encouraging people to get out and vote. There's just not a large turnout for that unless you're really 100% supporting gung-ho for that candidate.
Right. And then I guess sometimes propositions get people out to vote. But
Some propositions, there was nothing
that people considered sexy on this ballot.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, it's all very, very interesting. So then we have the, let's talk about the Attorney General race. And overall, it seems like Javier Becerra got a very large plurality of the vote.
Yes, he did.
45, almost avoided having the fight in November.
Maybe the end of the month it might come up that he may, but that's pushing it.
So, and then his challenger on the other side of the political aisle, it looks like in November, will be Stephen Bailey. So how do you see that shaping up for November?
I see Xavier doing well.
And he's obviously been in Congress. He's done other things politically.
So I see him doing very well.
So he has, like you say, that name recognition.
Yeah, he has that name recognition, and also he has local recognition because his wife is from Fresno.
Oh.
So and he's also in Fresno quite often.
Okay. So hopefully whoever gets elected, they'll remember the Valley and remember to help do some good things here.
Let's hope so.
Let's hope. So,
just not during campaign season.
now the congressional race for one of the other districts between Jim Costa and Elizabeth Hang.
Yes.
How is that going?
So the last numbers, Congressman Costa had 53%, and his challenger Elizabeth Hang had 47%. That's a good showing. She did very well.
Right.
She did very well.
And it seems like every time that Representative Costa runs for re-election, it's always a knockdown, drag-out, tooth and nail sort of struggle.
Some of them are.
Right.
He has a good voter base here in Fresno.
Right.
He's not as strong in Madera or Merced, and that's where her strength is, Merced and Madera. So when he's campaigning this time, I see him campaigning heavy in Madera and Merced.
And it'll be anybody's ball game probably in November. It just depends on who campaigns the best.
Yes, and who the voters like.
Right.
I mean, she's a fresh new face, right. And she's worked in Washington, and she has a base of supporters from Washington and financial supporters that are going to be helping her.
Right. Would you say that she's more organized and well-funded perhaps than some of the prior candidates who've come close with in the elections against Representative Costa?
I think she may be. I think she may be.
So that'll be interesting to see how that turns out.
Yeah, that'll be an interesting one.
Okay. So we've got some other local races and things that we'll be discussing, but right now we're going to take a break and we'll be back in just a couple of minutes.
Okay, thank you.
Stay tuned. Welcome back. I'm still here with Gail Gaston. This is Valley Movers and Shakers, and we're going to keep talking about the election results and what it means, what it might mean, and just go through them and see what this means for our ever-changing Valley political scene. So we're going to start talking about some of the state Senate races. There was a state Senate race, and we had Andy Vidak and Melissa Hurtado. And how did that come out?
Yes, with Andy Vidak, he came out with 55%, and Melissa Hurtado 22%. And she's new to this. She is a Sanger City Council person, which recently got elected.
Right.
It's a race that looks like she can pull some more numbers in.
Okay.
But Vidak is very strong.
Right. So you don't think that necessarily is wrapped up yet? It
No.
kind of just depends on how the remaining votes are counted.
It depends. Yeah.
Okay. Because with the low turnout that we have, the percentage difference
That's a big
doesn't
percentage.
necessarily mean that he'll end up with more than the 50, huh?
Yeah. So we'll see how that happens.
All right. And so we've got the 12th State Senate District, which seems like it was maybe a little bit more hotly contested. We had Ana Caballero, I think, who's based out of Monterey County and running against some Madera County Supervisor Rob Pothras, right?
Yes.
How did that turn out?
Anna had 41% and Robert had 27%. It's a seat that looks like the Democrats could flip it, and she can win that seat.
So, and that's a
little bit of her
seat
district comes into Fresno.
Right.
So she has been to Fresno.
Right.
And
now, when a seat that normally is occupied by one party flips over and another party wins that seat, people maybe tend to analyze, what does that mean more broadly? Is it based on some national trend, or is it surrounding an issue, or is it just a candidate thing? What do you think?
It could be all. It could be the candidate, that they really like the candidate, and that the candidate has a message that addresses their issues, and that they're looking for a change.
Right.
All of those.
But it looks like they'll go at it again in November, and we'll see how it turns out.
Yes.
And as you say, whatever happens now doesn't necessarily mean it translates to November.
That's right. Yeah.
Okay. So then we've got a race for the auditor, controller.
Yes.
And there were some. That was kind of an interesting race, but it looks like it might go into November, huh?
It just depends on the end of the month when all the votes are counted, because there's still votes that have to be counted at the elections office. There's provisional ballots and there's absentee ballots that are still there counting.
Right.
So today or Friday, you'll get another count from the election office, and they'll give another count. So these numbers will go up.
Right.
And then every Wednesday and Friday until she certifies the vote in July.
Right.
So there's a chance that a lot of these numbers will move up. Like Oscar's numbers may move up, and there may not be a runoff.
Oscar Garcia.
Yeah, Oscar Garcia.
Right.
He has 48%. David Keyes has 44%.
Historically, do the mail-in ballots that get the last-minute ballots that are counted, do those tend to go one way or the other, party-wise?
It's usually the way it works with the ballots is the first group of ballots that comes in gives you an idea of what candidates are in the race and which ones are getting higher votes, less votes. The provisional and the absentee ballots that come in, and no, it's just divided up.
Okay. So, and it seemed like we had an interesting race for city council here locally.
Yes.
That seems like it's neck and neck, at least at the primary stage, between Brian Whelan and Nelson Esparza. And what do you have to say about that one?
Well, with the Brian Whelan Nelson Esparza race, that's a city council race. We also had Veva Isles in that race, and she was a very strong candidate, but she did come in third.
Right. Veva
Brian,
Islas?
yes.
Yeah.
And I apologize,
No,
I
no
said her
worries.
name wrong. Brian Whalen spent a lot of money on that race.
Right. And when we talk locally, I mean, just in case people don't know, when you talk about a lot of money for
I'm
a
saying
local
that
race
he
like
spent almost $200,000 on that race.
That's a
Between
lot of money.
mailers,
Wow.
between mailers, signs, and working that race, he spent almost $200,000 on that race, I was told.
So,
And he got 38% of the vote. And Nelson Esparza, who is already an elected official with the County Board of Education,
right.
received 37%. I look for those numbers also to go up in both of those.
Okay. So
that's going to be a race to watch.
that'll be
Yes.
one of those knockdown dragouts,
Yes.
it sounds like.
Yes.
So you talked about money, and people don't really realize these days, even at the local level, let's talk about a city council campaign, to run effectively. Now it's just a primary, and you said already 200,000.
That's what they're telling me.
To go to distance, even for a local race like that, these days, how much money do you really need to stockpile and to
I'd say
run a winning
for a
campaign?
good city council race, at least 100,000.
At least 100,000.
At least 100,000, because you're going to
Okay.
be doing marketing, mailers.
And are you talking about for the
flyers.
whole way, or just to the primary, or how? What?
I would say probably about, you'd need 100 between both of the primary and the general. I mean, that would be tight.
Right.
That would be tight.
But even by those standards, spending 200,000 by the primary, that's
That's a lot.
pumping a ton
Yeah,
of money
that's pumping
into
a ton of money into it.
it. Okay, just wanted to make sure we
Yeah.
gave our folks out there a little bit of
Yeah.
perspective on how much
And
is a lot.
that's another thing. It's like if your candidate is a good fundraiser, they have to be able to bring that money in
Right.
to run that election. A lot of times people will say, this is a really good candidate, but they may not be able to bring the money in to run.
So you have to be good on the issues. You have to be a good motivator of people, speaking
Yeah.
wise, but you also have to be able to raise money.
You have to be able to raise money
To
and
get your
ask
message
for
out
money.
there.
And it's hard for candidates to ask for money.
Right. So it's very interesting. So locally, we had some other interesting races. We had, in terms of,
Well, we
these-
had the District 3 race.
and how did that turn out?
That was with Miguel Arias.
Right.
And he was the top one, and that was 30%. And presently, Darren Miller is the runner-up, and that's 15%. But I look for those numbers to change because there was Darren Miller, former city council member Craig Sharton was also running for that seat.
Right.
And then also community activist and business owner Tate Hill was also running for that seat.
And it looks like it's neck and neck pretty much for that second place position. They all are
Yes.
right around 14.5%.
Yes,
So
yes.
that really will go
They're
down
very close. That's going to go down. We're not sure
Right.
who second place is yet.
Right. So.
But I don't see Miguel Arias' numbers change. I mean, I see him going up a little bit, but I don't think anybody's going to get close to him right now.
And then again, whoever's in second, then it's a whole new ball game come November.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Well, that's
And it's all about campaigning, getting out, meeting the voters, and finding out what the voters' needs are.
right. So we also have, and this is a funny. I'm bringing this up just to be kind of silly. Okay.
Okay.
I know we always have a race for county clerk, and the county.
yes.
Yeah. So and that wasn't much of a race. Brandy Orth. I
But
think,
somebody did run
ran away
against
with it.
Brandy, yes.
Right. Now the clerk, doesn't the clerk certify the election results?
Yes, she does.
So we're running for the race of the person who certifies the races.
Yes.
I don't know. It's kind of interesting to me. I guess I'm not really a politophile like some, but I just thought that was kind of.
If ever you have an opportunity, speak with Brandy, and you can take a tour of the whole elections, exactly what goes on through the whole election
Right.
process. It's very interesting,
right.
very
right.
educating. I've done it, and I really enjoyed
Right.
it.
And I want to be clear. I'm not making
Yeah.
fun of any candidates.
Oh,
I mean,
no,
it's
no,
obviously
no,
an important
no,
position in
no.
our county, but but anyway, just
But yeah, somebody did run against her, so she had to campaign.
right. And so we did have some races that were unopposed. The district attorney was unopposed,
Yes,
right? So
yes.
Lisa Smitkamp is looking at another term. Unlike some of the some other counties here in the valley that had very hotly contested district attorneys races.
Yes.
In Madera,
We had Madera. Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
That one.
The incumbent's out.
David Lynn.
David Lynn is out. Yeah.
And then the same thing, I think, in Merced, right? Merced,
Yeah, I didn't have the Merced information, but.
The DA Morse is out.
Oh, yes, right. He's out. Yes,
right.
Yes.
So when a DA gets voted out like that, what do you think that kind of signifies?
Well, it's making a statement that they're not happy with the service that the community's been receiving.
Right. And so that really is more of a vote against the incumbent than necessarily for whoever the other candidate is, you think?
Yeah, a lot to do with that, yeah.
All right.
I mean, they want to make sure that incumbent doesn't come back again.
Okay. So, and then obviously we've got unopposed for sheriff, and then in council district number 1.
Now, for the sheriff, go back to Margaret Mims. She was unopposed, but there was a campaign going on that they were doing a write-in vote for a political activist. So that wouldn't show up on the report, but there was a group that was doing a write-in vote for a political activist that was not happy with the sheriff's, Sheriff Mims.
Well, that activist got 3%.
Yes.
So,
is that what they got? Okay.
I think it was like 3.5%. So,
Okay.
So Sheriff Mims
Margaret Mims did fine.
Right.
Yeah.
And then in council district number 1, it was also unopposed Esmeralda Soria.
Yes, and she was excellent. She did a great job.
Right. So she's was running unopposed and has been reelected.
And that tells you when they're running unopposed, they're doing a good job, and the community is very happy with them. So if someone would say, I'm going to run, they would be discouraged to run because the community would say, her voting community would say, no, we're happy with her, we're supporting her, we want her to continue to be our council person.
Right. And the same thing with the sheriff and the district attorney. It's just like,
yes,
you go talk to a political consultant such as yourself and somebody says, don't bother.
Yeah. Yeah.
No chance there.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So we've had some other interesting local races. Well, let's talk about,
there was one I wanted to tell you about.
Right.
Eddie Valero, Tulare County Supervisor.
Okay.
He won right out, and he's the first Hispanic to get elected.
Oh, okay.
To that Tulare County Supervisor. Before that, we did have Lali Manahano, and she was a Hispanic woman, but she was appointed.
Right.
So this was the first elected in Tulare County.
Okay.
To get elected.
So there's going to be a little bit more diverse power structure in Tulare County.
Yes.
All right.
And
so
he won right out.
interesting.
So that's making a statement. That's very good.
And so let's talk, if I can, just a little bit about the judicial elections. We had a couple of judicial elections here locally, right?
Yes, we did.
We had 2 for Superior Court Judge, positions number 4 and 8. I don't know how necessarily these numbers work, but for number 4, it was William Terrence against Roger Wilson, and Mr. Terrence won out.
Yes.
One out means you don't have to, there's not going to be another.
There won't be a runoff.
Another runoff.
Yeah,
So.
yeah.
And so we'll have.
And he had a high percentage. He won by a high percentage.
Right.
And I think he did a lot of marketing, a lot of campaigning, and got his message out.
A prosecutor.
Yes.
Right, and going into
yes.
now becoming a judge. And then in seat number 8, it was Robert Mangano, who I think is also a district attorney.
Yes.
Right? And against Brent Woodward, who I believe is a county attorney.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
And Mr. Mangano won kind of a similar
numbers
for both of those.
Yes.
So what does that tell you?
Well, it tells me that they campaigned heavy and hard to a targeted group that they knew that are voting, and that possibly the opponents that were running against them didn't put as much money into it or campaign as hard.
Okay.
It's really getting your message out and getting people to be familiar with your name.
So for a judicial race, we talked about city council, but for a judicial race,
And that's
what's
a county
considered?
race.
Right. How much money typically goes into a contested judicial campaign these days?
Probably, I'm thinking about 250,000.
That much?
Yes.
Wow.
Because you have to look at all the things that you're doing. You're doing signs, you're doing mailers. That cost a lot of money. That's a big county to mail
Right.
information to. And if you're doing like 4 mailers, your 4 mailers are probably going to cost you 75,000.
Right.
If you're depending on what group you're targeting.
Right. So, and you got to spend that money unless you
Yeah.
can find 10,000 people to deliver things for you, right?
Yeah, but you're still going to pay those.
Right.
And volunteers will only do so much.
Right.
Now, I want your audience not to hold me to these figures.
No, these are all just kind of ballparks. We're not looking at anybody's records. We're just trying to, it costs money to
It costs money.
Politics, it does
And it's
cost
raising
money.
money, it costs money.
So, any other surprising local races that we did have some county supervisor races where there were unopposed candidates. Buddy Mendez, supervisor number 4, was unopposed.
Buddy,
Right.
he was unopposed,
And same with our assessor recorder. There was no opposition there.
Yes.
There was an opposed race in supervisor district number 1, but Brian Pacheco looks like
Brian
he's
Pacheco,
won
he did fine.
hands down.
Yeah.
And so,
I think some of the races this time coming November to watch will be the Devin Nunes and Andrew Jantz,
okay,
and the Jim Costa and Elizabeth, Elizabeth Hang.
Right.
Elizabeth Hang. I think that those will be races to watch.
Okay. And the debates will be interesting too.
Yes, they will be.
All right.
Yeah.
So we're going to take our last break and then come back and talk more about just what these elections mean and moving forward, what maybe we can look at in November. We'll be right back.
Okay.
Welcome back to Valley Movers and Shakers. This is our election edition, where we've been talking about the election and all things political in the aftermath of the primaries this week. So now we're going to talk about, Gail, I want to talk about just certain little issues that have come up that seem interesting. We had, a Senate primary race we already talked about that Senator Feinstein looks like she won rather handily. But there was an interesting trend, at least I saw some headlines that there was in San Luis Obispo County, for instance, there was a candidate, Patrick Little.
Same last name as you?
Not related to me, but
okay.
And he was campaigned as a white supremacist.
Okay.
A white nationalist, whatever you want to call it, and he got actually a fair number of votes, like 500 votes, which, I don't know. I mean, that seems like a lot of votes for somebody who, is
that seems
a
like
member
a lot
of what
that
is
seems like a
considered
lot of
hate
votes,
group.
yeah, and it's scary.
Yeah. So what do you think that
and
says about?
And that tells us that there's people out there.
Yeah. What do you think that says about the attitudes right now? in our country.
That when someone runs with that attitude, that they feel free to run and express their views, and they feel that they have a vote. And we should feel free to
express our views. But what do you think that?
Well,
that someone who is a member of a hate group can get 500 votes like that. It seems like a high number.
It is a high number, and it's scary, and it tells us, I go back to Martin Luther King saying there's work yet to be done, that we have a lot of work yet to be done.
Yeah, so that was a little bit interesting. You also hear about, a lot of people have said that, maybe there was going to be a big change here in California, that a lot of seats that were blue seats were maybe going to go red, and it didn't happen, I guess, statewide as much as we thought, although November could mean something else. But do you see that California is becoming more of a 50-50 state than maybe people considered it a while ago?
I don't think so.
Okay.
I don't see that happening here in California. I think the Valley is conservative, but California as a whole is a Democratic state.
Okay. So what other races locally here in November that we haven't talked about that are interesting to you as a political consultant?
Well, I think that I'm concerned about education. My family's always involved in education. I think I shared this with you before, that my husband's family, Gaston family, have a school named after my husband's uncle, Rutherford B. Gaston Middle School.
Right.
And so we really believe in education, and that education is the goal to move ahead and open doors for students and to grow into the people that we become.
So you're more interested in the education
So I'm
races.
I'm really looking at education races for that November, and the education school board races don't do a primary; they just do the general, and it's the top vote getter wins.
Right.
And so there are some races coming up. There's Nazarene Johnson, an excellent candidate, and she's running in that Bullard race, school board race. The incumbent is not running. So that'll be an open seat.
Okay.
So she's running for that seat.
And who are the people contesting for that seat?
There's another woman running for that seat, and her name is Terry Edwards.
Okay. And she's a relative of Les Kimber, former
yes.
local political figure.
Yes, Les was a former political person, actively. Actually, he was on the city council, Fresno City Council. And he was actively involved in the Martin Luther King Committee, and helped to have that come about for the city of Fresno.
Is there any other anyone else has thrown their hat in?
Yes. Well, in that Bullard one, no. But Nazarene Johnson is an excellent candidate for that seat. I like it because she has children in that district, and she has children in that school system.
Okay. Okay.
Another candidate, Robert Fuentes.
Okay.
And he is an attorney here in Fresno.
Okay.
And
he's a guest on our show not too long ago.
Okay.
Yeah.
And he's running for the Edison seat.
Okay.
And I think that he would be an asset to the Fresno Unified School Board with his being an attorney and his commitment to education.
And who is the opponent there?
At the time, I'm not sure of his opponent in that seat.
Okay.
I don't think anyone has pulled papers in that yet. Another good one that is on the school board, Valerie Davis, and she's the Sunnyside area.
Okay.
And Valerie will be running, and I don't see anyone pulling papers to run against her either.
Right. So we'll have at least some new school board members, obviously, because we've had a few who are not running again.
Yes.
So that'll be interesting to see what happens come November in that.
Yeah. And I just think it's really important to follow up with the school board. I know it's like not a race that's well publicized, but with the commitment with our children in the community and education.
Right. Yeah, education, I think we agree that it's important. getting a little bit, I know this is Valley Movers and Shakers, but apparently there's an historically close race for the mayor in San Francisco. I think it's like a 200 vote difference right now.
Yes, yes.
I mean, it's primaries, but
yes.
it
Because
shows
it'll
that,
go, yeah.
shows that there's a pretty hotly contested mayoral race there.
Yes, yes.
And
Tell me her name. She's running because she was appointed.
Right. Well, we've got Mark Lino, right?
Yeah,
And
Mark.
he's running against. Excuse me, I'm not really as up on Bay Area politics as maybe I should be, but it's the mayor's race in San Francisco, and it's very close.
Okay.
200 votes for a big city like that. That's based like a dead heat.
Yes, that is. And there was a woman that was appointed when the mayor had passed away.
Right.
And I know that she's very well liked, and she's running. And then you said Mark Leno?
Yes.
Is running against her.
Okay. Well, great. Well, it sounds like we've got a lot of exciting things in our community and statewide,
Yes.
and things are all going to come in. Some races have already been decided where where people have gotten the outright majority, and there are many more races to be decided come November.
Yeah. I think that for myself, the candidates that are running, whether they be Republican, Democrat, declined to state, that it's just important that we get elected officials in there that are here for the community, here for the state, and here to represent the people.
Right, and that we've got people who really, as our show says, who want to get in and make a positive change for our community, no matter how they envision it, no matter how they intend on accomplishing it.
Because everybody that's running for an office has a vision, and they have a goal, and they want to accomplish things, and I commend them for that. Right.
And it takes a lot of courage to run for office. You throw yourself out there, right?
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, you put yourself under what they call the microscope,
they do.
Right?
They
a lot of
do.
people wouldn't want that attention or scrutiny, right?
Yeah. So they're really taking a step forward and wanting to do good. They want to do something good.
All right. Well, let's just hope that whoever gets elected, that they remember the communities that they're representing and do their best for them.
Okay.
Gail Gaston.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for being on this episode of Valley Moves and Shakers.
Thank you for inviting me.
Maybe back in November we can revisit all these things.
Yes. Thank you.
Very well. So that'll do it for tonight's episode, and thank you for tuning in, and we'll see you next Thursday. Valley Moves and Shakers.
CentralValleyTalk.com